Hussein is the lantern of guidance and the ship to salvation, and the ship to salvation. إن الحسين مصباح الهدى وسفينة النجاة.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to our respected viewers here on Lantern of Light. And once again, I would like to warmly welcome you all on today's program. This is your host, Sakeena Habib. How are you all keeping? I hope that everybody is keeping in good health, inshallah. Today marks the first of Safar. So it's the beginning of the month of Safar. And as we all know that again, we are in that state of mourning and we are still commemorating the martyrdom of the master of martyrs, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And of course, now we see the role of Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha more. And since we all know that this month is, a little heavy on the mu'mineen and mu'minat, so we should recite a couple of du'as. I'm sure all of you know the du'as, especially to be recited on the first night of Safar. And moving on to our today's conversation and topic, before I move on to that, I want to thank each and everyone out there, who have been supporting Lantern of Light throughout these years. I can say that, we have really blossomed over the last 5 to 6 years. Lantern of Light started initially in 2021, and we have had a couple of phenomenal podcasts with amazing scholars, with highly qualified therapists who are experts in their fields. We've also had we've offered one-to-one sessions with so many clients out there who found it very beneficial when it comes to being when it comes to having to need support in mental health or in making their faith strong and all these kind of areas. And simply apart from that, just to seek education in terms of Islamic philosophy and Islamic knowledge. Of course, we've had our founder, Sister Naseem Walji Pir Muhammad, whom we are so much grateful to. She's always worked so hard and pushed in these areas, and she's been a hope for so many out there, a beacon of hope. And with that, I would want to thank each and everybody out there who've always been supporting our podcasts and programs as much as possible. And I will still encourage so many brothers and sisters out there to give us a thumbs like, and also keep sharing these kind of important podcasts as much as possible, because the messages that we talk about, the conversations that we have, really have some impactful values. And you never know, it can change someone's life, be it even one person. If it really brings a change within your heart, within your soul, then we know that we're doing the right thing. And if there are any topics that you would want to suggest to us, please feel free to DM us. Let us know your feedback, and tell us what topics should we bring to you. And if anybody is interested to even come as a speaker, if you want to share your journey of hardships or something that you've achieved in your life and you feel that it will bring a change in someone's life, so make sure to do that. We're happy to welcome you on board. Along with that, it will be so nice if some of you can help donate in these areas, to make the work more stand out, right? So even if you're donating £1 or £5, or no matter how much you can, it's going to be very helpful, because it's going to motivate our platform to grow more, and it will also motivate our speakers on board, who have been supporting us throughout these years. Okay, so with all of that done, now I want to give you a gist of today's topic. I know that so many of our brothers and sisters have been looking forward to this topic. I will say that this is One of the very first that we're bringing to you, and hopefully we can have many more in the future as well. So today we're going to be talking about men's mental health and emotional well-being. Usually it's always the women, and it's like the woman who is always the victim, and we show ourselves more empathy, more compassion, and the woman is like the flower, and she needs to be taken care of. But what about the man as well, right? So we need to even talk about men, because they are also human beings. They've got feelings. They're human beings just like us. They go through financial stress. They go through family stress. They go through emotional feelings, and sometimes they can't really speak much about it. And the reason is, okay, this might make some of you mad out there. Maybe it will make a lot of men mad, but so I think that many men in general are lost today, especially Muslim men. A lot of men, as well as women, I believe, think that being masculine means being cold, detached, emotionally unavailable, like to not have any sort of feelings, to not have any softness in your heart, and should not be allowed to express a lot, no vulnerability, but just to have control over themselves and over others. But that's not masculinity. That's actually ego, and is the opposite of the man whom we are told to follow. And the best example I would give is of our holy prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, who was known as Rahmatul lil Alameen. And he was strong, but he was never aggressive. And he led, but never with arrogance. He, in fact, cried in public at times. We also know that when he was humiliated, he used to go back home to his daughter, Bibi Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alaiha, and he used to cry out in front of her. And she used to heal his wounds, not only physically, but also emotionally, right? And then we hear about even Imam Ali alayhi salam, that how he used to help around with housework. I mean, there was nothing that he needed to feel shy about. Today we see this as a taboo, like this is something which is shunned away, right? But look at these amazing personalities and figures that teach us that what is actually masculinity, what is a man. And then we see Prophet Muhammad being kind to children, to women, and he would even be kind with his enemies. And he carried himself with dignity and not with dominance. So real masculinity in Islam is more about mercy, responsibility, and emotional strength, not detachment. And if you see men trying to portray themselves like being emotionally shut off, and they think that we don't need to be emotionally available, and sort of shut down themselves emotionally, that's sadly trauma, sometimes dressed up as toughness. And we need to educate and aware a lot of our upcoming young boys and brothers today about letting themselves sometimes be free and being able to express themselves, serving as authentic human beings and not some robots on autopilot mode, right? So today's discussion will be quite interesting. I myself don't know what's coming ahead, but I'm very eager to find out with our very well esteemed guest who's been on board with us a couple of times. He doesn't need an introduction, but I will still say a few words about him. Here, Brother Inayat Kanji, known as Coach Kanji from Ample Therapy. And he is a life coach, and he is also a rapid transformational therapist, mental health first aider, and he is an eclectic life coach and therapist, who is very active on a daily basis and helps a lot of people. So we're going to have him today share a lot more things, maybe even from a personal background and from his expertise. So without much further ado, I would like to welcome Brother Inayat Kanji on board and welcome him, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Sister Sakeena, for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure indeed. Thank you so much, Brother Inayat, for joining me once again from your hectic routine. And I don't know what we're going to be discussing exactly on today's topic, but I think we can, unfold some of the areas where people have a lot of misconceptions about, are men allowed to, express their emotions? Are they allowed to navigate their emotions? Or is it something that, should be shunned? So there are a lot of questions to begin with. And the first one that I'd like to start with is that, are really men allowed to express their emotions just like women? Yes or no?
And it's interesting. Okay, so inshallah, I do justice to some of these questions, but they are deeply profound questions. Because in a basic reductionist sense, of course, we are able to. Of course, we are able to express ourselves, yes, in the same way that women express their emotions and feelings. However, at the same time, as creatures, our nature, we have difference. So maybe to some degree, though we share the human similarities, and thus the emotional processes are in essence the same, because we are different vehicles to some degree as male and women, men and women, there sometimes are certain expressions which might be seen as different, but ultimately we should all be expressing. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. So,
Hopefully,
you know,
hopefully that answered the question succinctly, but I'm sure there's much to unpick and like open still. So yeah, please.
no, as you said that there's a difference in the way that we're designed, right? Like a woman is, designed in a way that she is trained to be a nurturer, right? So even from a very young age, she knows already, like there are some responsibilities that she needs to already expect or look forward to. And of course, a man is a boy from a very young age is, he has been raised in such a way that he knows that there are some responsibilities that he needs to fulfill. So maybe it's the way the mind is designed in that way, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in that way, right? So as you said, that is one thing that we need to look into. But if we're talking about uh, our feelings, okay, that why is it that when men express themselves or try to navigate their emotions, sometimes it is considered as feminine, like something to be shied upon or seen as a taboo in some
Hmm.
cultures, right? So why is it that?
Well, it's very interesting because you mentioned to some degree what I would describe as nature nurture, first and foremost, before we even address the question. Um, and interesting, is it something that is innate or is it something more environmental? That can also be discussed, right? As a man and a woman. Because as a
Right.
baby, having been a teacher, still practicing, educational therapies, working with young people, child therapies, obviously parents observe this process in detail. Is a young boy's requirement for emotional understanding and expression any different to a girl, let's say at 1 year old?
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think? What do you think, Sakeena? What do you think?
One years old, as in, like, I didn't get you. How?
A 1 year old baby, boy or
Yeah.
girl, so let's put the gender
Yeah.
thing to, because we're about to address, right? Why is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seen feminine for a man to express and address his emotions? So let's just take it to, like I say,
A
a
1 year
child.
old.
If I was a
Yeah.
1 year old, if I was working with a one
Yeah.
or a 2 year old, a 3 year old,
Yeah.
is there, because I know by 4, 5, 6, when I work with 4, 5, 6 year olds, now the
Yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
I'm giving away the answers. So what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts? 1 or 2 years old,
Okay. Yeah.
is there a difference in the way that a young boy and girl needs emotional comfort, security, and the ability to express?
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, even from my own personal experience, and I think what I've seen, what I've observed is that when it's a girl, you're more protective around her from that age. Yeah. But then if it's a boy, it's okay. Like, for example, if they even fall, I guess, once in
This
a while or something, you say, it's okay, it's a
interesting.
boy,
Pause,
you know?
pause, Sakina, pause. Sakina, pause, pause, pause. Right, because as you know, as a
Yeah.
neuro-linguistic, programmer, one who practices hypnotherapy, and I try and teach my clients, when
Yeah.
we're speaking, it's our inner world, right? And look, it was so interesting, the framing, with no judgment. When I, the adult, protects or doesn't protect, so that's environmental. Does that make sense?
Yes,
But what about the
environmental.
child? What is the
Yes, yes,
child
yes.
need? What's the child's need? That's our response as adults. But what do you think the child, if you deeply observed a 1-year-old or 2-year-old and then playing on the floor
Yeah.
and parents are in the room, is there any difference in the way in which they require the ability to express their emotion?
Yeah, definitely. There is a difference because if a girl starts crying, then I think everybody would start attending her,
Again,
like
we're not,
quite
we're not,
faster, quicker. I think so. I'm not sure.
Sakeena, sorry to overlap, and there might be a lot of this, right? Because we're not talking about the parents, we're not talking about the adults, we're talking about the child, right? It's not about, again, because we're environmental, we create this, we're societal, we create the thinking structures, right? What is the essence of the human? The regulatory system of a child, in my opinion, is exactly the same, boy or girl,
Yeah.
right? If I pick up a 1-year-old
Yeah, they're
boy,
both expressing
right?
emotions.
They don't even have language
Yeah.
at this stage, right? So as soon as they feel something, it's raw, and they just express through crying or some other, like,
Yes.
kind of streak of nature, right? To say, I need attention, right? They communicate in the most basic
Right,
ways,
right.
usually high pitch, right? Yeah, but
Yeah.
usually quite inflamed, right?
Yes.
Because it's raw emotion. So, like you said, though, society very quickly starts to say, hold on, the girl will comfort. The boy, man up, man up, man up. Now, when you're
Yeah,
told
man up.
that
Yeah.
again and again and again, like you say, by the time you're 10 years old, can a boy then express himself equally to a girl? Arguably not. But is that a construction or is that an innate thing? In my opinion, it's a construction because I have to often then break down these stoic men you described earlier who feel it's their duty to protect and then carry the weight of the world on themselves, and are CEOs and 40-year-old men who seem all collected and together, but they have a lot of disconnection from themselves because they've had to ignore their emotions in the process of providing, functioning, surviving. And we're not just survival mechanisms working in the survival instincts, are we? Once we've catered for shelter, clothes, food, everything other, it's all just emotion. The ocean of human emotion within us, as you know, I like to use that phrase, right? And so, boy or girl, man or woman,
Yes.
child, adult, right? What is your filtering process of emotion? What's your regulation system of emotion? I try and teach people it's feelings create thoughts that create behaviors. So if I'm not deeply connected and I know that process inside out, forwards and backwards, and I can express it with flow, there's no dams, there's no eruptions, it just flows. I can be in a flow state and I can have a simple, not overthinking mind, right? It's all part of, actually, in my opinion, the mastery of the self. So for me, it is essential for a man, especially if you're a provider, that to take on all these other roles and responsibilities, to be in touch with that system. It's the yin and the yang. It doesn't mean you're effeminate, but unfortunately, society, as you referred to, or inferred, or maybe I
Yeah.
derived, creates this little quandary.
Yes.
But yeah, I hope that answered the question to some degree.
It does. It definitely does. I think the way you've categorized how from a very young age, we tend to what do you say, like put this ideology, or I don't know, it's because of the environment, as you said, it truly affects how the upbringing is then done ahead. Also, I think when it comes to boys, like many of us, we say that okay, we need to, for example, educate the boy more. Girls don't need to like girls don't need that much of an education, because ahead eventually they have to become the nurturers of the house, and their responsibilities will eventually fall towards their families. So a lot of pressure should be put on a boy from a very young age, so that when he's when he reaches that certain potential age, then he should master a lot of life skills and how to provide basically for his family. And if he's not able to do that, then again that's seen as an underestimating thing for a boy, right? So and what happens sometimes in these narratives is that the opposite happens, right? Like every action has an opposite reaction. When you tell your responsibilities should fall more towards your house and everything, they try to become the overachievers. And when it comes to the boys, then you see that a lot of young boys eventually drop out, or are not interested or are not earning as was expected, and their interest then decreases. Have you noticed this kind of behavior that takes place?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in the modern world now as well, things are massively and rapidly changing. While some families are able to
Yeah.
maintain traditional systems because of economics or life choices, many can't, right? And in that process, the roles in themselves seem a bit more fluid. Like you mentioned, Imam Ali alayhi salam would clean, right? We know stories, many stories of
Right.
you know. Evidence that masculinity is not in just provision, right? There's all forms
Yeah.
of care, right? And softness, like we said, yin and yang. You have to have both abilities. Otherwise, how do you relate to your
Yes.
4-year-old daughter, for instance, if you can't be maternal as well as paternal? But we are more one than the other, right? In our nature of X and Y
Are you there?
chromosomes. Yes, I'm still here. I'm
Yeah.
still here. Maybe the line cut a little bit. So apologies. I'll reiterate what I just said. So how would you connect with a 4-year-old daughter if you didn't have some maternal kind of natures and instincts, right? If you were just fully paternal, right? I don't think we are 100% one or the other. I think we lean more towards one, but we have both natures, yin and yang, say. And therefore, within that, we should be able to be soft and flexible in our approaches all the time, right? Because it's a team effort, like loving and raising children. And there's much that needs fluidity and not rigidity. But at the same time, when we talk about boys specifically, this is what I mean growing up. If you're just leaning on the provision side of things and looking at security and outcome of achievement and expectation within the world of building an industry, then we are also forgetting all the other aspects of the boy, right? The spirit, the human, the energy, right? I'm not just a therapist. This is something I do.
Right.
This is not me. Does that make sense, right? I was once a TV presenter. I was once a teacher,
Right.
right? They were just skills I acquired to provide and to also have an experience of life that I enjoy. I feel worthy and valued and purposeful with it, right? So for a young boy, the ability to play and explore and be himself without pressure. And I could take it to another analogy. I teach people physical therapy. So if I'm teaching somebody how to get fitter and stronger, I don't want to kill them on session 1. I don't want to give them too much pressure. We stack, steady stacking, consistency. 1 more kilo, 1 more kilo, right? 1 more rep, 1 more rep, 1 more minute, 1 more minute.
Right.
So the same thing for a boy. He'll learn in time if given time to breathe and make
Yeah.
mistakes as well. There's so much I could say, because when we talk about entrepreneurial spirit, even failure shouldn't be a bad word, because in making those mistakes, it's those people who've really become great, successful people. I met with a friend of mine yesterday who in the education system was considered very, very average, if not below average. He's a super successful entrepreneur. Why? He believed in himself and he took risks. His parents didn't build within him the fear of failure, right? Just learn. So empowerment of young
Right.
men is a very interesting one, and it's a multifaceted, as with girls. But when we're talking specific about emotions and roles, I think sometimes the two almost are counterintuitive because one ends up beating the other out of the equation. Does that make sense? And like you say, then people
Yes.
fall into a place of either numbness or complete oversensitivity, and they can't balance their rationale against their emotion, and thus they're wounded all over and injured, and therefore they can't industrialize anyway. They can't do their role anyway, right? So before inflicting so much trauma, one needs to build some strength, resilience, and that actually comes through vulnerability, sharing, and everything other. To know you're not alone, and it's a difficult struggle to be a man to some degree, as it's a woman, right? Because there's a lot of responsibility within it. But yeah.
Right. And what about when we talk about a man being affected by emotions in the house? For example, maybe you're a spouse, or you have a partner, and you have to deal with the everyday conversations or arguments, and sometimes you feel like, you're being mentally exhausted, emotionally you're getting exhausted. And I don't know about, I think men, tend to express very less compared to women, because men are I mean, the way a man's mind is wired is quite differently compared to a woman's, obviously. So usually the vocabulary which is even used, the emotional vocabulary, is very low, like very less number of words are used, to express. So does that in a way, affect the mental health and the emotional well-being of a man in that state?
Well, I think life in itself is not black and white, it's full of color. And so, while yes, in terms of patterns of data, we're to do some math, we might be able to conclude that this is men, right? However, equally, I know through my journey of trauma, healing, and then therapy, I learned the vocabulary, right? And having been an English teacher, I already thought I had a great vocabulary, but I realized that this is not about analytics. This is about emotion, intuitiveness, feeling, energy,
Mm.
right? It's a deeper understanding of being. And that's why I talk about connection, connection, connection. Because some people may not be the most articulate, but equally they can connect with their emotion and through a few words convey their emotion. Does that make sense? Some of
Yeah,
them might be a bit more
it does.
poetical and in their nature of expression. And that also is a skill. It's a skill, not necessarily a way of being. Does that make sense? It's just the articulation in
Right.
terms of communication appears more expressive because it's more colorful, right? But sometimes, equally, if I just give you the shade of blue in depth in a few words,
Yeah.
you can analyze that and you can sit with that feeling, right? And there's different moments with different people,
Yeah.
right? But the question is, do you have that filter system? Do you know how to connect with the feelings, let it pass to a thought, and then express through the motor muscle the connection between this and this? Or do you overthink? You whir it round, keep selecting which one you want, frame it, calculate it before you even let it out. Do you push it down? Not that one. Oh, maybe not that one. And that's down to, like, I think more so the nature, nurture conversation we were talking about, and nurture
Mm.
dominating one's nature and then changing one's nature. Because, like I say, at the bottom of it,
Right.
a lack of expression leads to depression, to press down one's emotions, right? So
Right.
I, for instance, encourage men to do art. Is art a male or female thing, right? It's not in the major sense of things in the world. Nobody would say it's a male or a
Yeah.
female, but I know culturally some people might even think it, right? Because again,
Mm.
if you
Yeah.
paint or you build, which one is more masculine? But I teach mixed martial arts. Is that not the art of physical expression in combat? So it's very masculine to some.
Yes, it is.
But
Yeah.
equally, I was doing some the other day, like, it's like dance with fighting, right? It's the ability to move one's body and master one's body, right? So there's effeminate aspects to it in some way, right? But it's again just the framing. And one sees, oh, I'm fighting, right? So it's interesting, like how we view the male and female. To me, like I say, there's not much difference other than our responsibilities to some degree, right? But equally, we share in those too. So it's just maybe someone leads in one area, one leads in another area, or spends more time in one area, right? That's the currency. But my emotional regulation system as a human, it's not that much different. But then again, logic and rationality. How do we balance that within the equation? How should one react is another discussion to emotion, right? To feel and express, but are we able to use rationality and logic in that process as well, and balance and master emotion? Because, like I say, feelings and thoughts, how do they connect? Or is it just flow of feeling and overwhelm, right? I have to express. So there's so many different aspects to this, right? It's not to be stoic, it's to be balanced. Because in chaos, sometimes I need to have the ability to master my feeling, right? To still act. But then sometimes I need to be able to just listen to somebody else and be almost vacant of my emotion to actively listen and let them heal. Does that make sense? So emotional mastery and emotions generally, like for me, is a lifelong journey, right? And that's why I think they, have coined it more beautifully than I could ever put it, in terms of the way in which our faith and the Prophet and Imam Ali has talked about, knowing your emotions is knowing God, right? Because you really know the human. So therefore, male is not excluded from that discussion, is he? That makes sense, Kina. Does that make sense? Oh, apologies. Oh, I think we've lost our host, and maybe I'm still here. So if that is the case, I'm going to just keep talking for the moment. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion. Um, the idea that a man or a woman have different emotional regulation systems, and therefore express in totally different ways. I don't believe so. As in the healing process, I notice it's the same for each individual. Therefore, to me, it is merely conditioning of society. And like I say, the roles and responsibilities we take on that push us into different ways of wiring. So if I'm constantly in a survival mode where I'm fixing chaos, actually, I might detach a little bit from my emotions. So actually, therefore, I need to introspect and learn how to, let's say, if I'm a doctor, I'm always seeing life and death, still be equally empathetic in the other moments of life. And not just because I'm able to master in those moments, those feelings, and push them into a different area of my energetic being for the moment, not feel them later, right? Because it might just be for the moment because you have a job to do, but equally you have to allow it to come through you. Otherwise, you eventually become numb as that doctor or surgeon, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same process. And also, like I say, being I know you're back, Sakeena, so I was just talking because I was still live and I'm not
Yeah,
sure
sorry.
if it was
Yeah,
recording.
yeah, please continue.
Yes,
Sorry, I had some technical glitches from my side. I'm having today. Sorry, the network
not
is
a
bad.
problem. We can't control anything other than ourselves. So I was just saying, I was giving the analogy that if you're a man and let's say you're a surgeon, even if you're a woman, though, right? In the modern context, this is what I'm saying. The idea that we're talking just about men. Sometimes our nature-nurture relationship, the environment. If I'm a surgeon and I'm always seeing life and death, in that moment, I need to be able to master my feeling and be able to almost not compartmentalize it or push it away, but park it for a moment to deal with the chaos, the storm, right? But then I have to let it come through me at some point in a controlled fashion. That's the mastery of the feeling, because otherwise I'll disconnect from all emotion. And then what happens when you have to be empathetic in life and death, right? So it's a
Yeah.
very interesting. I don't think there's a black and white, as I say. I think it's full of color. And the way we navigate it is more about the filter system, and how we let our emotions come through us and understand them and master and able to balance them with our thought and our rationality. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I want to know that how do men typically navigate their emotions in stressful situations? Like, what is the best way to go about this? Because when it comes to the women, usually, will shout, will scream, or will let out the frustration in some way or the other, or will twist their arguments, will something like that, right? But what about
Bless,
men?
bless you for the honesty. I can't speak. I'm not a woman. No, genuinely, it's again. I think trauma is an interesting thing because we all respond to trauma in different ways, right? We create different protection mechanisms, and this is why, again, when you say women do this, there are many women who do that. Yes, you're right. But equally, I know certain women who are very cold and closed and stoic, a bit like a man. They've almost lent into their masculine energy because of the nurture nature relationship in their household, right? And how they're forced into that kind of way of being to some degree through a lack of expression being accepted. So again, it really does blur the lines of male and female. But naturally, like we said, people approach boys with almost that expectation. So therefore, they're always in chaos and storms, it feels, and always in that survival mode, right? Be it work, or anything other, right? In their personal settings, right? Because they're asked or required to play that role a lot of the time, the expectation of others. And therefore, I feel they get to a point, like I say, that they're always sitting in chaos. So they don't have time for feeling. They park it permanently. Does that make sense? And then you have different
Yes.
reactions. Like I say, some erupt a lot, some are like passive aggressive, the people pleasing, but there's anger underneath all the time bubbling, right? You have other kind
Right.
of, and like I say, and you'll see it in male and female, but just in the context of talking about male specifically here. I know many men of these natures. I am one of those men at one point in my life. I had different natures and ways of filtering, which weren't always helpful, right? It could be very
Yeah.
kind, very helpful, and then erupt, right? And it's, what is that other than a pressing down on one's feelings? So that again, I don't know
Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
illustrates my point.
Absolutely. I think the nature keeps changing throughout our journeys because we change as humans, right? We mature. We're not the same, person like 5 years back or 10 years back. You're not the same person. You eventually mature emotionally, intellectually, and all of that. So I think the nature keeps changing.
Indeed, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're right.
maturity is an interesting one. Yeah, maturity is interesting because it comes at different phases and stages. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. And sometimes, you realize in a moment that which you've been looking at for almost, it felt like a lifetime, right? The answer just comes to you.
Right.
So, emotional maturity is interesting because it has to be felt. It's experiential. It's not one of theory, really.
Yes, absolutely.
Feeling has to be felt. So yeah, knowing how to master emotion, like I say, and that's why I think the stages and phases of life are so interesting. God already puts them in place when you become a dad. To master one's own emotions, so therefore you can help and navigate for a child, right? Otherwise, we give trauma and we pass trauma, and generational trauma starts to exist, and then we just call it DNA. I wish we just like that because of my parents. But it's back to this philosophical discussion about nature, nurture, healing, passing on wounds, passing on fears, or healing from our parents so our children don't have to heal from us. And in that process, if you're a stoic, cold man, it's actually about finding your emotion again and be expressive and playing, dolls with your daughter, right? God does this in funny ways. I've seen it time and time again. Why is my stoic male friend got, 3 girls?
You're right.
He's the greatest planner. He knows. He knows.
I think, as you said, uh, that when you become a parent, eventually you become different, and you have to transform your what do you say, your needs and your requirements now to your children, right? So for example, if it's a dad to a daughter, then obviously now he will start playing with his daughter.
But it'd be sad that they only learn this process then, right? Some people, this is what I mean, they park it. I don't know how much the public.
She has to also change her requirements and adjustments towards her son.
Yeah, apologies, you broke up there.
Okay.
You broke up there for a moment, Sakeena.
A lot of.
Yeah, no. I just because you were breaking up.
Okay.
So I don't know how much the viewers heard what you were saying, but I was just agreeing with you. And saying within that as a closing point on it, for the parents though, it's sad though if they only wake up once they have kids. And this is what I mean. If we're not taught the
Yeah.
emotional regulation system from young, as a young boy or girl, when you get to the age where it's now your time to pass on the mantle of understanding, you don't have an understanding, do you? Right? And then you pass on the same, like, be a man up, don't cry. What are you crying for? Right? And feelings are either in or out.
Yeah.
And if you don't let them out, our body speaks it. That's why a lot of men have ailments, injuries, illnesses, et cetera, because they're carrying the weight upon themselves constantly, right? Like carrying the whole gym around with them, right? They need to let go, express. But yeah, sorry.
And can we talk about how do societal expectations influence men's emotional responses and help seeking? And can you share with us some strategies that can be effective for men to express their feelings safely?
Yeah, sure. I think, look, again, I think some of it we have spoken about the societal expectations, but again, in reiterating the point or trying to address it with more detail and depth. As a man, sometimes it's seen as weakness to express, right? Vulnerability is associated with a woman. Why? We could talk for hours, but essentially many understand this, right? Across the ages and stages of life and decades and centuries. But again, how do you relate to somebody from empathy rather than sympathy if you do not feel it yourself? They're two different things, aren't they, Skin? To sympathize and to empathize, right?
Right.
If I don't
Yes, I
know
agree.
how to cry, I'm not able to cry. How can I understand tears of a child? Their empathy and softness, right?
Wow.
So for men, I massively encourage, and that's why we're so lucky, I think, as Shias, that we have this whole month to teach us this, or 2 months, arguably, right?
Yeah.
And many other occasions as well, because we have this as a practice. We're taught it, let it out, mourn,
Yes.
scream, put yourself, wherever it need be. Like I say, martial arts is a form of that. If I punch a bag for half an hour, don't have much anger left at the end of it, right? So if men really want to start as a just basic format, this is why they're taught, and they're also taught control in that process. It's a very brotherly process. I have lots of Muslim brothers who I train in mixed martial arts, and we fight weekly, and we hug afterwards, and then we have a deep therapy session about life. It's very strange, the boys, right? But it works, right? So that's a basic thing guys can do. But equally, that happens in other forms of sport and things like that, because sometimes it's like we call a CBT. You need to do a behavior that changes your feeling, right? But if I have emotional mastery, I can do that through poetry, through discussion, through art. If I'm connected with my other side, my yin and my yang, right? And then my process of letting out feelings is much more effective and efficient, even, right? Don't have to wait for doing 3 rounds on a Friday night, you know. Um, I'm always expressive, right? Even when I'm not aggressive, even when I'm not in intense movement, right? I can express sitting still to myself, right? It's meditation. So there's so many things that I could say to. That's why we talk ample, right? Artistic, mental, physical, life-based, and educational, right? It's learning is a form of expression sometimes because it's your curiosity, it's your play from your deep-centered interest. So the inner child always must be awake within oneself and connected as a man, so that you know how to play through life and display a balanced, happy human being to your child, to your loved ones, to your wife, to be contented. So you don't throw and project your emotion through the chaos of life. You know how to balance your cup. Don't have too many spinning plates. Give time to yourself. So there's so many strategies, as I say. But I start with a lot of men with let's do some physical stuff. Feel good about yourself, like dopamine wise, and everything other, even aesthetically, right? Value your body, value your vehicle, health wise. But then we try and move a lot into artistic based expressions. I was an actor, right? I learned the art of expressing emotion beautifully through that process, right? KR Theatre do amazing shows and plays, right? And it's deep. You see the expression within it. And I was very fortunate to have a career like where I learned that process and I wasn't shunned to express. But in, as we say, other walks of life, some people are very much taught the opposite. So I try and coach men, find your methodology, something you connect with, whether it's art, whether it's poetry, whether you do write gratitude journals, but you've got to do something which is a bit more, as I say, still, where you sit with your emotion, right? And then also you have the other side of things, right? The physical,
Right.
etc.
So I think you've mentioned some good points here because in some households, what happens is that usually men, if they want to, de-stress themselves, they sit on the couch in front of the TV, and they just want to, like binge eating or something like that. And I think that stresses women more and frustrates them because watching your I mean at the end of the day, yes, of course you are providing for your family, you're working the entire day, but there are some moments, as you said, like it's good to involve yourself in physical activities more, right? So I guess sometimes when men do these kind of things, that elevates the emotional frustration at in different households, right? I'm just being very general about this. So at this end, and they say that that's also a way of de-stressing themselves. Some men even like playing like video games, for example, while sitting on the couch and stuff like that. Do you think that helps though? I mean, sometimes does it de-stress? is
I,
is is that something that should?
I think life is about balance. So if I have in a day done much physical activity and I've expressed and connected with my family members and I've had all the kind of experience of emotion through the day, sometimes to almost de-accelerate, slow down the mind, we do passive, right? Do passive things, right? It's a bit more passive, less active. Even computer games are technically active, so it's not so much. That's more play and enjoyment. Actually, it's entertainment, right? Stimulation. It's just a different form because it's relaxing. It's not stressful. It's not goal oriented, or but some do get anxious and frustrated when they play computer games. It depends on the nature of the person, right? But the point being is, if I saw someone at the end of the day, a man who's worked hard, watching I don't know, a documentary in the evening because he wants to, I'm not going to judge him for it, right? But it's all relative. Like, what has he done in the day? Now, and equally, like I say, for me, I like to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym, right? Before I've seen my clients and done physical work even, right? So I add more physical work to it. So when I end the day, believe it, Skinner, I fall flat every day, right? If I hit the bed at 8, 9 o'clock, I don't want to get up, right? My body's aching. If you're a builder, I have friends who are builders. It's the same kind of thing, right? So, but if you're at a desk all day, you might be mentally exhausted. Now the question is, are you balancing them? Because like I say, I enjoy physical activity. I don't see it as mentally exhausting. And that's more of an emotional blockage thing. It's more of a lack of value for one's vehicle, one's health, not understanding the relationship of dopamine and serotonin and all the other things that kick in you like a little chemistry lab when you start working out and doing stuff physical, right? Even the camaraderie of working in, like when you do sports, why do we have communal sports? Well, Koja community is quite good at, actually, right? Other people envy us to some degree, that the structure of it, but it's a saving grace, to be honest, right? And we should stay and keep with it because it allows you to bond through physical activity, right? And you have community and belonging and identity. There's so many other emotional aspects to it. It doesn't have to be said, like we were saying earlier, right? But equally, I think in the home, a woman is of the nature that they want to connect with emotion through verbal and, physical connections of communication, right? You want presence of being, right? So, and it's different, we want touch, all sorts of things within a marriage, right? So you need those moments where you talk in your room alone, not just in front of the kids, right? You need your times when you go out together and spend time together, right? You need time as a family together, right? There's so many other aspects of communication that if you're fulfilling all of this stuff, then what's wrong with a man having some downtime? Does that make sense? But if you're not
It does,
balancing,
absolutely.
then naturally there's going to be resentment, resent emotion on all parts, and everyone's getting frustrated. And remember, still though, my feelings are my feelings. Somebody else can't make me feel something. It's my reaction to the situation and how I feel about the situation, right? So we have to also ask ourselves, why do we choose certain things for ourselves, right? Because it is a team effort, and we are making choices daily in how we exist around each other, right? But that's all down to the art of communication.
Definitely. You mentioned a good point here that how we've got our sport activities and stuff within our Jamaat. So like even for women, like there should be a balance, as you said. If our men are going and they're having a good time playing sports and stuff, so a woman should not isolate herself or cage herself within the four walls. Even she should be allowed. Like if you give each other that space, which is a requirement in every relationship, it should be, it's not a must to always 24/7 be together. You need to give each other your own individual space so that you can figure yourself out, your own purpose, right? Every person has a purpose to themselves, so that house then becomes very well oriented. There's that balance, right? And the second point that you had mentioned was how when we express our feelings during these majalises, right, of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, like this is a universal gathering where a man is allowed to express himself the way he wants. And really, it is that platform where, if you have a heavy heart, if you're burdened, whatever, if you have even a trauma or something, this is the time to, release your feelings and everything. Speaking about also fatherhood, parenting, right? So I know a lot of women talk about going through postpartum depression, and going through that phase, especially when you're dealing with a newborn and everything. And I remember initially, from my personal experience, when my husband became a first time dad, it was very difficult for him as well to like completely adjust himself towards the child's needs. Like at that point, sometimes you don't understand that you've actually become a parent. And I feel a woman reacts more because she's expecting a lot more of that assistance and help. And if you're not getting that, then you're surprised, like, what's happening to this man? Why is he not like, doesn't he realize he's become a dad? And then later on, when we had a discussion on this properly, and he told me that I was going through an anxiety phase as well, because I was so scared. I didn't know how to hold the baby, I didn't know how to attend the baby, but I didn't have anybody to talk to about this. So I was surprised as well. I was like, oh, I didn't know that a man goes through these kind of feelings as well. And sometimes even men want to talk about it because they're feeling a lot more on the inside. It's just sometimes they are confused who to talk to about these kind of sensitive issues, right? So, as I think you did mention something similar to this earlier, that you've got like a lot of emotions built up within you, but it's sometimes the art of communication, like, who should I talk to, how should I talk to, how should I talk about it, who
But
can help me guide through it.
do you know what's really interesting, Sakeena? I'm sorry to interject, but hopefully my thought will be purposeful. So, as a man, we're taught very early, like I said, right? How are we taught very early to not express? It's by reactions, people's reactions, right? So by the time you become a dad, a husband, if your partner is overreactive, not balanced and healed in their emotions, not able to understand their emotions, sometimes we'll throw it at the partner, right? Now, if a man is already conditioned to some degree to be afraid to express himself from fear of reaction, and you've got a reactive partner, what do you think becomes the equation and the answer, right? Then we can take a different direction for a moment. Behind every thought is what? A feeling. Do men and women have any different amount of thoughts? I don't know. I've heard studies, 60,000 thoughts a day, all sorts of stuff, right? But I know there's a lot of them. There's a lot of thoughts in my head. And now I know as a therapist, oh, there's a feeling behind each of them. Or maybe there's a feeling behind the collective of them, right? But the point is there's feeling. So where does that go if I'm not able to express, right? And therefore, like you say, it's great to be able to connect to it from an external capacity through another person's story. Here, in the case being a very holy and spiritual and great story. But if you can't connect to yourself, that's like, just taking 1 month out of the year to, go through the physical process of emotional kind of like release. But you're not actually, because I see some people who can cry majalis and walk out and then be in a totally different state of being. Does that make sense as well? Right? It becomes almost performative, right? I'm being an actor. I can cry on cue. I can relate to an emotion in the moment and just cry, right? From my own perspective. But that, if they're healed, that's a different discussion. You might just be deeply sitting in it for a moment, reminding them, what's the word? Ruminating, right? It's different to healing. It's interesting, the healing process, right? Because as I cry, I need to release and let go and forget to some degree, right? Lighten myself, forgive myself. All sorts of different things have to go on in that process. So is a man always able to do that? Are they given the opportunity, the grounds to do it? It's an interesting discussion. The better the partnership in terms of communication and flow and the ability to express without rejection and reaction, the better the nature of both beings in a household. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. You're right. Our natures are different, and sometimes we just need to sit down and have these deep conversations to understand each other. That's what I even observed and learned. We tend to overreact, and we don't want to listen to the other person, which is sometimes why we begin to just like assume and judge someone before one should actually. So it's very important to listen out to each other. Okay, what about I think we will almost now try to wrap up today's program. I have another question, and that is that how might understanding men's unique emotional struggles improve support programs and help others in shaping their personalities or their emotions, regulate their emotions in general?
That's an excellent question. I think that's an excellent question. I think just like the paradigm with women, that they may not get an opportunity enough to connect and kind of get together as a community and do things they enjoy doing, right? Because of the roles and societal expectations. Similarly, for a man, we need to be given opportunities and almost like structures and examples and guidance in the form of emotional sharing. Right? I do retreats sometimes. And within those facilitations that I do like sharing circles. Right? How many men get together and just share what's going on with them from a feeling perspective? Not what I've done this week. Oh, I've done this, mate. I've done that, mate. Like it's like, what's my feelings, right? But again, like you say, this is about emotional vocabulary. It's actually an educational process, and that's why we need workshops, functions, events, retreats. A lot of my friends do these brotherhood circles, which are amazing. They go for hikes and camps with boys and and they teach from young. Or sometimes they do it with dads. Give opportunity to sit around a campfire and talk. But it's about giving space to oneself, time, kindness, allowing oneself to feel and express. And sometimes, yeah, as you say, we have to cultivate it for each other, show each other how through these kind of organized programs. So I would love to see it more in the community, especially for men, because like
Yeah.
we've discussed for the last hour, it's been a long time that men have been told, oh, this is not what men do, as if it's something literally, it's not part of our being, right? So that's almost denying your whole human existence, as I say, feelings, great thoughts, great behaviors. So it's natural that we're going to have a breakdown in society, and mental health for men is on the rise. And when I used to work for charities and work in these campaigns, it really shocked me when you look at suicide rates for men and things like that. It's much, much higher than women. So it's again, let's say it's an interesting discussion with much nuance, but men need assistance. Men do definitely need assistance, as do women.
Right. I think, yeah, you've actually said the important things that are really required today. So I think, yes, these kind of retreats and get togethers, bonfires and stuff really do, what do you say, refresh, the emotions of a man, even like sports and everything. It really helps a man feel rejuvenated and everything. And we're not saying that, when men sit down together and, when they're like expressing or sharing these kind of feelings, as you said, it's not like we're gossiping about our family, right? We're not gossiping about our partners. We're not sharing, of course, very intimate stuff. This is just like your feelings about your journey, right, with each other. So can you just also clarify about this point? Because people,
Sure,
I
sure.
think mostly women have this misconception, like what, when men sit down together, like what are they talking about exactly?
Again, this is such an interesting thing because this comes from the issue of security, trust, fear, right? Fear is false expectation appearing real or false evidence appearing real, in my opinion. Again, security and insecurity, right? If I'm in a loving relationship where I trust, I should feel secure, secure for my man, for my partner, for my wife to express, right? And there shouldn't be stigma. This is the other thing. Because we stigmatize each other, none of us express, right? But all of us might be going through the same thing. And because to some degree it might be our fear of other people knowing our flaws, this is what leads us to then close, right? But in my opinion, I think transparency is so healing. And when the more we're able to do that in trusted circles, the better. And so even when we talk about intimacy and different things, it's all about trust. Because sometimes I need to speak to someone other than my partner, and it's all about intention as well. Niyat, what's my niyat? I'm not here to gossip. I'm here to help. I'm here to improve. Here to understand. Here to process. Right. So yeah, again, there's no black and white in it. So there are some things, of course, you must keep private, but arguably for each individual that will be different because it'll be based on their security. Right. Does that make sense? I almost feel like there's many areas you could talk about for me other than private intimacy issues, physical intimacy. I don't think there's many areas I would not be comfortable with sharing with my friends. Does that make sense? Right? Because
Yes,
they can
absolutely.
really help in my emotional mastery. And sometimes I go home and I talk better then to that person, right? So yeah. So look, let's not have fear, but also understand, the sensitivity around personal situations, but no trust and read the room, right? So yeah. So sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing a lot today on today's conversation. And I hope to have a part 2 series with you because we want to, talk about a lot about men's emotional well-being. So I really want to thank you for being on today's program, for taking out your time, and I also want to apologize for my network connection today. I don't know what's wrong, but I'm sorry about the glitches in between. But I hope that your message that you were conversing about, that you put out, was conveyed to the viewers, because that was the most important part here. So thank you so much, Brother Inayat, for your time.
Appreciate you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning on today's program. And I would like to, once again encourage each one of you to please do share today's podcast as much as possible. I hope that the conversation was beneficial to many. This is a very raw conversation that we had. And, usually you will not hear such conversations that are very raw and appealing. So, we are trying to our level best to make it as relatable as possible. At the same time, we're being transparent, and at the same time, we're trying to keep it in a very appropriate manner, right? The format and the content, so that everybody can benefit from this. So please make sure to give us your feedback and comments on today's program, and inshallah, if you're interested to have a part 2 series as well, then please do let us know. I'm very thankful to Brother Inayat to share his expertise with us on today's program, and I would also like to apologize for any glitches from my part, for any inconvenience that has been caused. Inshallah, I'll be seeing you in our next upcoming podcasts. And with that, I would like to ask each one of you to please remember me in your du'as, and I will do the same. And may inshallah Allah accept our azadari during these ayame aza, inshallah. This is your host Sakeena Habib signing off. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.